The First World War ended with silence that sounded like relief. Men came home broken, nations exhausted, and the victors signed papers promising that such horror would never happen again. But beneath that promise smoldered resentment, fear, and pride. The Treaty of Versailles crippled Germany's economy, dismantled her military, and carved her borders into humiliation. A proud people were left starving in the streets, their money worthless, their hopes fading like smoke. In beer halls and dark corners, bitterness fermented. From that bitterness rose a man whose voice could turn despair into fury, Adolf Hitler. He was a soldier without rank, a dreamer without mercy, a man who looked into the ruins and saw destiny. He promised to make Germany strong again, to restore her honor, to unite her people under one banner and one leader. Crowds filled the squares, arms raised, chanting his name. In his eyes they saw deliverance. In his words they found vengeance. Across Europe, others like him were already marching. Benito Mussolini in Italy wrapped his dreams in black uniforms and parades. He called himself Il Duce, the leader, and promised to resurrect the Roman Empire. In the East, the Empire of Japan, guided by its divine Emperor Hirohito and ruthless generals, looked to dominate Asia, believing conquest was their destiny. The democracies, Britain, France, the United States, stood weary and cautious. They had bled too much in the Great War. They prayed that treaties and words could hold back ambition. But ambition had teeth. By the early 1930s, Germany rearmed in secret. Factories turned from making tools to making tanks. Pilots trained in hidden airfields. The world watched but hesitated. Then came 1936, the remilitarization of the Rhineland, a direct violation of Versailles. France could have stopped Hitler with one order. It did not. The gamble worked, and the dictator learned a lesson. The world feared another war more than it feared him. Austria fell next. In 1938, German troops rolled across its borders to cheering crowds. The Anschluss was complete, and Hitler's confidence soared. He demanded the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia, claiming to protect ethnic Germans there. Europe's leaders met him in Munich. Neville Chamberlain returned to London waving a paper and declaring peace for our time. But peace built on lies cannot stand. Within months, Czechoslovakia was swallowed whole. The next target was Poland. On August 23, 1939, Hitler signed a secret pact with Joseph Stalin, the Soviet dictator. They agreed to divide Eastern Europe like gamblers sharing stolen coins. 8 days later, the world erupted. At dawn on September 1, 1939, the sky above Poland was torn by sirens and engines. German dive bombers screamed downward. Cities burned. Tanks crushed defenses. Poland fought bravely, but was overrun in weeks. Britain and France declared war. Too late to save her. The Second World War had begun. For the second time in 20 years, humanity plunged into madness. If this story grips you, if you feel the weight of history returning to life, subscribe, like, and share this documentary so others can witness how the world was set ablaze. Germany struck west in the spring of 1940. Norway and Denmark fell in days. Then came Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. The German Blitzkrieg, lightning war, was unstoppable. Fast tanks, screaming aircraft, coordinated destruction. France, thought to be invincible behind the Maginot Line, was crushed in 6 weeks. Paris surrendered, and Hitler posed before the Eiffel Tower as conqueror of Europe. On the beaches of Dunkirk, hundreds of thousands of British and French soldiers were trapped. Yet across the channel came a miracle, tiny civilian boats sailing into the fire to rescue them. It was chaos turned courage, disaster turned legend. 300,000 lives were saved. Britain now stood alone. The island nation faced the full fury of the Luftwaffe. Night after night bombs rained down. London burned, but its people did not break. From underground shelters came laughter, music, and defiance. Prime Minister Winston Churchill rallied them with words that would echo through time. "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall never surrender." By autumn 1940, Hitler's air assault had failed. The Battle of Britain was his first defeat. The free world still had a heartbeat. In the East, Stalin prepared nervously. The pact with Germany was uneasy, but for now it kept the Soviets safe. Or so he thought. June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa. 3 million German soldiers invaded the Soviet Union. It was the largest land invasion in history. Cities fell: Minsk, Smolensk, Kiev, and yet still the Red Army fought on. Winter came early, and with it came vengeance. The German advance froze in the snow before Moscow. For the first time, the Nazi war machine faltered. While Europe burned, another fire ignited in the Pacific. December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. Japanese bombers descended upon Hawaii, destroying battleships and killing thousands. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan. 4 days later, Germany and Italy declared war on America. Now the conflict spanned every ocean, every continent. America mobilized with astonishing speed. Factories roared to life. Men and women filled assembly lines. Soldiers trained in millions. President Franklin D. Roosevelt called the nation the arsenal of democracy. In North Africa, the tide began to turn. British General Bernard Montgomery faced the brilliant German commander Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox. At El Alamein, the Allies won their first major victory. Churchill declared, "This is not the end, nor even the beginning of the end, but it is the end of the beginning." In the bitter winter of 1942-43, the German Sixth Army laid siege to Stalingrad. For months, street by street, building by building, they fought the Soviets in a frozen hell. Then the Red Army encircled them. Cut off and starving, 90,000 Germans surrendered. It was Hitler's greatest defeat and the war's turning point. Across the Atlantic, Allied forces landed in North Africa, then Sicily, then Italy itself. Mussolini was captured and executed by his own people. Italy surrendered, but Germany fought on. In the Pacific, the tide also shifted. At Midway, American aircraft carriers ambushed the Japanese fleet, sinking 4 carriers and changing the balance of power. From island to island, U.S. forces advanced: Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan. Each victory costly but decisive. By 1944, Allied armies gathered in Britain for the greatest invasion in history, Operation Overlord, D-Day. On June 6th, before dawn, thousands of ships crossed the English Channel. Paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines. When the sun rose, the beaches of Normandy exploded in fire. By nightfall, the Allies had a foothold in Europe again. France would soon be free. As Allied troops advanced from the west and Soviet armies from the east, Hitler's empire crumbled. But he refused to surrender, dragging Germany into ruin with him. If these moments of sacrifice and bravery move you, subscribe, like, and share. Let the courage of those who fought never be forgotten. The liberation of Paris came in August 1944. Crowds wept as French soldiers marched beneath their own flag again. But even in triumph, the cost was unbearable. Millions had died, cities lay in ashes, and the Holocaust's horrors were only beginning to be revealed. In December 1944, Hitler launched one last desperate attack, the Battle of the Bulge. Through the frozen forests of Belgium, German tanks struck the Allied lines. For weeks, the outcome hung in doubt, until the weather cleared and Allied aircraft returned to the skies. The Bulge collapsed. Germany's fate was sealed. In the east, the Soviets stormed toward Berlin. Cities turned to rubble. Civilians fled in terror. By April 1945, the Red Army surrounded the German capital. In a bunker beneath the ruins, Adolf Hitler took his own life. His empire of hate ended not with triumph, but with silence. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The guns across Europe fell quiet. VE Day, victory in Europe, had arrived. Crowds danced in the streets of London, Paris, and New York. Tears of joy mixed with grief for those who would never return. But the war was not yet over. In the Pacific, Japan fought on. From 1942 to 1945, the United States fought across the Pacific island by island. At Iwo Jima and Okinawa, entire landscapes became battlefields. Casualties soared on both sides. Japanese soldiers fought to the death. Civilians jumped from cliffs rather than surrender. President Harry Truman, who succeeded Roosevelt after his death in April 1945, faced a terrible choice. To invade Japan could cost 1 million more lives. Scientists had built a new weapon, the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, an American B-29 dropped the first bomb on Hiroshima. In seconds, a city vanished. 3 days later, Nagasaki followed. The world entered the nuclear age in fire and shadow. On August 15th, Japan surrendered. World War II was over. The war left the planet scarred beyond comprehension. Over 50 million dead, cities reduced to dust, families erased from memory. The Holocaust revealed the darkest depths of human cruelty. 6 million Jews murdered in camps designed for death. At Nuremberg, the surviving Nazi leaders were tried for their crimes. Justice, though imperfect, was done. The old empires crumbled. The United Nations was born, a hope that the world might never again descend into such madness. But new tensions arose. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, born from the ashes of alliance. Technology, power, and conscience. It proved that tyranny can rise quickly, but freedom, though slower, endures. It gave us heroes. Winston Churchill, the unbreakable voice of defiance. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the steady hand that armed democracy. Joseph Stalin, brutal yet pivotal in defeating Nazism. Dwight Eisenhower and George Patton, who led with resolve. Douglas MacArthur, who fulfilled his promise to return. And countless unnamed soldiers, nurses, partisans, and civilians who stood when standing seemed impossible. The world that emerged was wounded but wiser. It learned, painfully, that peace demands vigilance and freedom demands sacrifice. So remember their courage, their suffering, and their triumph. Because the story of World War II is not only about death and destruction, it is about the human spirit refusing to die. If this journey moved you, if you believe these stories must live on, subscribe, like, and share so that generations to come will know what was sacrificed for the world we live in today.